It is time for our new row in our quilt along. Today we will be sewing curves. Hi there and welcome to the Sugaridoo channel. My name is Irene and today there is a new part for the Sugaridoo Bernina quilt along. We will be making part 7, row 8, which is called Around the Corner. And this is what it looks like. We are going to do curves today. All these nice wobbly bubbly shapes, and as you might notice, they are all different. So we are doing curves and we're doing improv. A little bit of improv. So I'm super excited. I hope you're too, and don't be nervous because it's not so scary as it might seem. The technique that we will be using today is called reverse applique. So that means that we will be sewing a shape to our background fabric, reverse that, and then applique it on our main fabric. If you're experienced with sewing curves and want to do this in a different way, feel free to do that. No need to exactly follow the technique that I'm doing. If you want to do a different applique technique, that's also perfectly fine by me. I'm going to show the reverse applique, and for that I'm going to use tea bag paper. But if you don't have that, you might use a very thin lining fabric or just a very thin cotton fabric. I think that also works. And if you do know this technique and you have a great alternative for tea bag paper, please feel free to drop it down in the comments below to help others out. Because I'm sure that there's different materials as well that you can use for this technique. Oh, and for the improv part, where all my wobble bubbles are different shapes, if you don't like that idea, I'm going to give you directions to make them all the same shape. Yeah, so what else is there to say? I guess we're just going to get started with it. So here's what we need today. We need our background fabric, main fabric and accent fabric, inch rulers. I'm using a long one and a short one, but this is a centimeter ruler. Here's the other inch ruler, rotary cutter, a pencil or a pen to write on your tea bag paper or lining fabric, whatever it is you're going to use, ironing board, sewing machine, my Bernina 770, tea, snacks, and fabric scissors. So that's it. That's all we need today to make a row. We are going to start by making just one block, so you can test out the method, see if you want to cut your fabric pieces bigger or smaller, just to try it out. So I'm going to start with cutting a strip of 6 inch, because all the fabric that I need is going to be 6 inch wide. But if you're not sure yet and you just want to test it out, feel free to just cut a rectangle of 6 by 4.5 inch. Just try it out and see what works for you. I'm going to start with this little block, and I'm going to start with a piece of tea bag paper. Roughly the same size is good enough. And then of course I also need fabric from my main fabric. And also for this, the size that you will need for this depends on the size of your rounded shape that you're going to draw. But as a start, I am going to start with a little bit over 4 inches by 2 3/4. So let me just cut 3 inch, and then I'll see what I need for the next blocks. There we go. 3 pieces. That will make our first block. The next step is to draw on the tea bag paper the shape that we want to make from in our main fabric. So we're going to draw on the tea bag paper the actual size, so don't need to take seam allowance into account. And you can choose whatever shape you'd like to make. So we're going for a half rounded shape, like so. And try to make the shape a maximum of 4.5 inch wide and 2 inches high. So you can go smaller than 2 inch and 4.5 inch, but try not to make it bigger than that, because your block is only 5 inch wide, and when you go higher, then it will be too close to the things that are above the block. So I'm just going to place my ruler over here and see 4.5 inches quite big. I'm just going to start with a small one of, let's say, 3 inches. So I will mark here 2 little markings that say 3 inch, and then let's see how high I want to go. Going to go with 1 3/4 inch. So now I have 3 markings, and those I will use to draw my shape. Oh, by the way, you can go up, you can go up 2 1/4 inch, because the bottom quarter you will lose due to seam allowance. So you can go maximum 2 1/4 inch, because this little part below will be cut off. And that is also the reason why I start with going straight up from here, and after that making a bend. So it's just a rough sketch. Don't think about it too much. Just draw something and go with it. So I'm just going to place it roughly in the center of my background fabric, and I'm going to set my stitch length a little bit smaller than I normally will use, and so just over the line that I drew here. So through the tea bag paper and my background paper, my background fabric. And as you can see, I have my machine set to the needle down position, so every time I stop, my needle will be down and my foot will hover a little bit so that I can rotate or pivot my fabric. There we go. So I just stitched the tea bag paper to my background fabric. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut away the inner side of the shape. And I'm going to cut roughly to 1/4 inch on the inside of the shape. And now I am going to make little snippets towards the seam, so that it will be easier to turn this shape inside out. Little snippets all the way up to the seam. There we go. And now the magical part, we're going to turn this inside out. So I am going to bring the tea bag paper to the other side of the fabric. And I'm just going to gently press outward all the seams. So as you can see here, this part is pointing in, but I'm just gently pressing all the way up to the seam so that the tea bag paper is nicely folded back along the whole seam. And now you can also see why we made the snippets. So the more snippets you make, the smoother the shape will be. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to give this a press, and then the first part is done. There it is, nicely pressed. And now all you need to do is place your main fabric behind it. And we're going to stitch around the shape at the top of the fabric. So you can choose if you want to take a decorative stitch, so maybe a blanket stitch or something, or just to a nice top stitch. I like to stitch very close to the edge with a stitch with a little bit with a little bigger stitch length. So maybe I'll go for stitch length 3 or something to nicely stitch around it. You can go for a color thread or just a thread in your background fabric. Just do what you like. Oh yeah, and before I sew this, I just pop in a few pins. Perfect, so nicely top stitched around the whole edge. And now it's time to trim the block. This block is going to be 5.5 inch wide, so all the blocks are going to be 5.5 inch wide, including seam allowance, and it's going to be 3 and 3/4 of an inch high. So let's trim that. That's our very first block, and now we have some excess fabric and tea bag paper on the back. So you can go ahead and fold your fabric out of the way and trim along this line. So this is what we cut off. This is what left at the back. You see my block is a tiny bit wonky, and that is probably because I stretched this fabric or I didn't pin it well enough. So maybe it's probably it's better to pin your fabric like so when you're sewing. That way probably there will be less shifting of your fabric, but just try it out, just see how it goes for you. And yeah, so like I said, just make a test block like I did now. You can always learn something from making a test block. And what you can also see is how much fabric you trimmed off. So for me, starting with the size that I started with, so starting with the size that is mentioned in the blog, that works fine for me. And also for my background fabric, I think it's fine, the fabric that is left over. So I'm happy enough with how the block turned out and how big the fabric was that I started with, and how much fabric there was wasted from the fabric that you trim away. That's fine for me, so I'm going to go with these measurements. Those are also the measurements that are in the blog. But if you think I was a little short on the edges while squaring the background fabric, just take a bigger piece if you need it. If you think there was a lot of main fabric wasted, take a smaller piece if you want to. Yeah, just try it out a little bit and see what you need. So in total we will need 7 of these. So that is 5.5 inch wide and 3 3/4 high. We need 14 blocks of 5.5 inch wide and 3.5 inch high. And we need 7 blocks of 5.5 inch wide and 4 3/4 high. So those are the blocks you need. All the information, of course, is also on the blog. And you can pick a few of those to make in your accent fabric. I'm going to do two of those half rounded shapes in my accent fabric, somewhere around the middle of the row. So those are the general instructions you need to make today's row. Just make a lot of rounded shapes with this reverse applique technique, and at the end of the video we will start to assemble all of them into one row. So I'm just going to show you one more thing, because I'm moving the position of the block of the main piece a little bit. So this one is pretty much in the center, but I'm playing around with that a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. So what I want to show you is that when you look at the row, you see that the blocks in the center of the row have their main fabric piece pretty much in the center of the block. And the blocks on the left side of the row have their main fabric piece more aligned to the left side of the block. And the blocks on the right side of the row have the main fabric piece more aligned to the right side of the block. So you can play around with that a little bit, where you place your main fabric. Just make sure that you always keep it further than 1/2 inch from the side, because you already lose 1/4 inch on seam allowance on this side, and then yeah, you just want to have it at least 1/2 inch from the side. But play around with it a little bit and try to make roughly 1/3 of your blocks having the main fabric a little bit more to the left. Doesn't need to be so dramatic, and roughly 1/3 in the middle, and roughly 1/3 a little bit more to the right. So that will give a really nice playful feel to your row. A little side note, of course, if you don't want to go crazy with improv and have all your blocks look the same, that is just fine. You can sketch out a paper template and use the same shape for all of your blocks. That is completely fine if you want to go with that, to make all your shapes symmetrical and nicely half circles. That's fine. But as you can see in this one, my shapes are not symmetrical and they are not all the same, and I really like how that is going to look, because also the row this way is a little bit of improv, and this row has a little bit of that whimsical improvness, so that it's not all as straight and perfect as some of the other patterns. So yeah, I guess that makes the quilt extra fun when some of the rows are a little bit wonky and a little bit different. But if you don't feel like that, just make it super symmetrical and make all the blocks the same. That is your choice. Just go what brings you the most joy. I have now finished a few of the blocks, and I've just sorted them by size. So they are all 5.5 wide, but these are 3 3/4, 3.5, and 4 3/4. So now I can see a little how much they go to the left or how much they go to the right, and how much are in the center. So that from all of them I have some that are closer to the right, some that are in the middle, and some that are close to the left. So it doesn't need to be exactly 1/3 of each, but just to make sure that not everything is only to the left or everything is only to the right. Yeah, so I have my stack of background fabric, and I'm just going to continue sewing with them until all of them are done. It's time to put the row on my design wall. So let's put these projects aside and let's find a nice layout for this row. We have 3 different sizes. So the smallest one is B, and that is going to be in every part of the row. And then we have the middle part, which is A. And then we have the biggest one, which is C. So underneath every C is going to be a B, and underneath every A is going to be a B. And there's also going to be a strip of just background fabric added below this. Yeah, so this is how it's going to be. We are going to alternate A and B and C and B. So that's how we're going to build up the row. And then we have the aspect of where the piece is. It's more to the right or more to the left or in the center. So I'm just going to play around with this and find a nice composition. So I just laid them out on my design wall. These are all the centered ones, these are more to the left and these are more to the right. So now just going to mix and match them to make one row. And there we go, the final piece. I think this looks very fun. So yeah, now it's just time to sew everything together. First I'm going to sew the blocks together that are above each other, and then the whole row. So yeah, let's stack some blocks and sew them. Da-da-da-da! There it is, the row all sewn together. Such a happy one. It was quite some work. I don't think this is the most difficult technique, but it's a lot of handling. First to draw it, then to sew, then cut it, turn it inside out, sew the main fabric behind it, then sewing all the blocks together. But I love how it turned out. A very different row than all the other ones because of the round shapes and because of the improv. All the blocks in this row are different, but I really like it. I think it will look awesome with all the other rows. And there is another row with round shapes to come, so they will match perfectly. That's it. I really hope you like making this one. I'm super curious how you like this row, if round shapes was something new for you, and I'm very curious how you like the applique technique. And I would love to hear it in the comments below. And yeah, that's the end of the video. Can't wait to see what you will be making and how this is going to look in the fabrics of your choice. Thank you so much for sewing along with the quilt along. I will be back here again with another row in 4 weeks. Hope to see you then. Bye!